Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Excellent. Today, we're tackling a figure who's, well, let's just say larger than life, Giacomo Casanova.
Ah, Casanova.
Now, beyond the legendary lover image, is there more to discover?
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more to him than that.
That's what we're here to find out. Our source material today is excerpts from his Wikipedia page.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, I know, right? But it's actually a treasure trove of information. It's like a window into 18th century Europe seen through the eyes of, well, someone who knew how to live.
I can't argue with that.
So the big question is, can we uncover a Casanova that goes beyond the love him and leave him stereotype? What do you think?
Well, for starters, it's fascinating how his name is practically synonymous with seduction. But when you dig a little deeper, you realize his life was so much more than that. Just look at his resume, you could say. Lawyer, clergyman, military officer, violinist.
Wow, it's like he collected professions.
He really did. And then you add in gambler, businessman, diplomat, even a spy.
Wait, a spy?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Oh yeah, the man had a knack for intrigue. And amidst all that, he still found time to write. Over 20 works.
Over 20. Wow.
Plays, essays, he even dipped his toe into what we might consider early science fiction with a book called Icosameron.
Okay, hold on, science fiction. That's not what I expected.
It's true. And it wasn't just churning out words either. I came across this quote from a contemporary who described Casanova as a well of knowledge.
A well of knowledge. I like that.
Right, and this is the kicker. The same person also said Casanova believes in nothing except what is most incredible.
Okay, now that's intriguing. Embracing contradictions almost seems essential to his persona, doesn't it?
Definitely. I think that's key to understanding him. This man who thrives on contradictions. A true Renaissance man.
And he was born in 18th century Venice, no less.
Of all places, right?
Talk about a setting that's, well, not exactly known for subtlety.
You've got that right. Venice at that time was essentially Europe's pleasure capital. Think carnival, gambling dens. It was a society where indulging in vices was almost expected.
The ultimate playground for the wealthy and adventurous.
Exactly. It was a must-see destination on the Grand Tour for all the young noblemen back then.
So imagine Casanova growing up in this environment. His parents, actors, immersed in theater and performance from his childhood.
Oh, absolutely. It was a world where appearances mattered,
Yeah.
where wit and charm were, currency. And Venice, with its elaborate masked balls and social rituals, was a stage for the wealthy and powerful.
Wow. It makes you wonder, did he see life itself as one grand performance? I mean, given his upbringing, was he always on, in a sense?
That's such an interesting question. Think about it. From a young age, he was surrounded by this world where appearances mattered so much, where wit and charm were like essential tools.
He had to master the art of self-presentation, right? It was practically ingrained in him.
Precisely.
But even in a city as, let's say, freewheeling as Venice, he managed to stir up trouble. Like that imprisonment in the infamous Leeds prison, that's not just your average night out, right?
Definitely not. What captivates me about that story isn't just the escape itself, though it is a pretty incredible escape.
Oh, I bet.
But it's what it reveals about his character, trapped in one of the most secure prisons in Europe,
No pressure.
facing a life sentence, right? But he doesn't just give up. Instead, his intellect, his cleverness, becomes his tool for survival.
So instead of crumbling, his mind kicks into overdrive. It's almost like being surrounded by those lead-lined walls amplified his resourcefulness.
Right, like a pressure cooker of creativity almost.
Exactly. So walk us through this escape. How did he pull it off?
Well, the details are incredible. He somehow managed to smuggle in an iron bar.
Seriously?
Yeah. And he sharpened it into a spike, meticulously carved a hole in the ceiling.
Talk about dedication.
It's almost surgical, the precision. And then the escape onto the roof of the Doge's palace itself.
Oh, wow.
Descending with the bedsheet rope into the Venetian fog. Talk about a scene straight out of a movie.
It's like something you'd read in an adventure novel.
It really is. But it's a testament to his cunning and audacity and to the resilience of the human spirit, I guess you could say.
It sounds like the same drive that fueled his legendary love affairs. I mean, it's quite a contrast, right? The man who could pen profound reflections on the one hand, and then on the other, a Casanova whose love life was, well, prolific.
It's true. It's where things get really interesting, I think.
Yeah, how do we reconcile those two sides of him?
Well, he described his conquests, let's say, in distinct acts, like a play director almost. He even believed that gratitude was the key to winning a woman's heart.
Gratitude. Interesting tactic.
Right. I found this quote where he says, gratitude is one of the surest and shortest means to conquer a woman.
Shortest means. Sounds a bit calculated, doesn't it? Even a bit manipulative, perhaps.
It does sound that way, I'll admit. But I think it's crucial to remember that societal norms around love and relationships were vastly different back then. It was a different era, different expectations.
Right. Context is key. So you're saying there might have been more to it than just, the chase.
I think so. For example, he often highlighted the intellect and wit of his partners. He wasn't just drawn to beauty, he was drawn to women who could match him mentally.
So there was a genuine appreciation for intelligence.
I believe so. He even claimed that one of his most passionate affairs was with a woman whose face he never saw.
Wow. Okay, that's a twist I didn't see coming. So much for superficiality, right?
Right. It sounds like there was a genuine appreciation for female intelligence and companionship, even if his approach may seem unconventional today.
To say the least. But Casanova wasn't all romance, was he? There's this whole other side. The gambler, the risk-taker.
Absolutely. Gambling wasn't just a vice for him, it was a tool. It financed his lifestyle, gave him access to these exclusive social circles, even served as a way to attract women.
So he was using it to fuel his adventures, to maintain his image. And speaking of image, his travels across Europe put him in contact with everyone from royalty to Voltaire, even possibly Mozart. He was like collecting experiences.
He truly was. It's amazing. What do you think drove him to constantly push boundaries, geographically and socially?
That's a great question. What was he searching for?
I think it speaks to a deeper restlessness within him, a constant desire for knowledge, for experience, for connection. It's like he needed to unravel the world's mysteries, both the intellectual ones and the personal ones. And his memoirs, Histoire de ma vie, they offer a fascinating window into that journey.
His memoirs, they weren't just tales of romantic conquests, were they?
Not at all. They were written during his later years. He was working as a librarian in Bohemia at the time.
A librarian? Wow, that's not where I saw him ending up.
Right. But those memoirs provide incredible insights into 18th century life. Everything from social customs to everyday realities. It's amazing what you find in there.
I find it fascinating that he chose to write them in French. He actually says it was more widely known than mine, meaning Italian. Even back then, he understood the power of reaching a wide audience.
Absolutely. It shows a real awareness of the world beyond his immediate circle. And within those memoirs, he makes it clear, his intention wasn't just to entertain, but to instruct and offer himself up to the judgment of the reader.
That's surprisingly introspective, especially for someone with such a flamboyant reputation.
I know. It's like he's inviting us to look beyond the surface, to judge him, not just on his actions, but on his thoughts and motivations, to really understand him.
And that's where things get really interesting, right?
Oh, yeah. Because while his memoirs are full of information, they also raise questions about their accuracy.
How much did he embellish things?
Exactly. How much was shaped by memory, by self-perception? It's hard to know for sure.
That blend of truth and storytelling, that's what makes his memoirs so captivating. It leaves us wondering, where does the man end and the myth begin?
Exactly. And that ambiguity is perhaps the most enduring aspect of Casanova's legacy. It compels us to keep searching, to keep questioning, to try and understand the man behind the legend. It's really striking, how Casanova's Venetian upbringing shaped him. And it wasn't just the city's permissive atmosphere. His family background also played a big role.
Right, his parents were actors.
Yes. And not just any actors. They were deeply embedded in a world that revolved around performance, illusion, captivating audiences. It makes you wonder how that might influence a child's perception of reality, of social interactions.
Almost like he was being prepped for a life of intrigue and adventure right from the start.
In a way, absolutely. From childhood, he's immersed in this world where appearances are everything. Wit and charm, highly valued.
Which essential tools of the trade.
Precisely. And Venice itself, especially back then, was like a giant stage, for the wealthy and powerful.
And Casanova, with his natural charisma and dramatic flair, he was ready to take center stage, knew how to create an image, craft a persona that was both intriguing and disarming.
Exactly. He even adopted various pseudonyms throughout his life. Baron, Count, even Chevalier de Saint-Gold.
So many identities.
It's like he was constantly adding to the mystique.
Yeah.
Never letting people pin him down.
Always one step ahead, always reinventing himself.
Right.
But even in a city as tolerant as Venice, he had a knack for pushing boundaries.
Oh, absolutely. Remember those scandals that forced him to flee Venice, Not once, but twice.
Oh, yeah. What was it, twice?
At least. There's that incident, for example, where he dug up a freshly buried corpse as a prank.
Wait, seriously? That's a bit dark, even for the 18th century.
It definitely speaks to his impulsiveness, his willingness to take risks,
Takes.
consequences be damned.
He definitely lived on the edge.
He did. And let's not forget the accusation of rape.
Right, right.
He was acquitted, but it still added to his notoriety, made him a target of the authorities.
So, this reputation as a troublemaker, did it follow him throughout his travels?
To a certain extent, yeah.
Really?
But it also added to his allure.
Really? How so?
Well, imagine this. Here's a man who escaped from one of the most secure prisons in Europe. He's known for his charm and wit, and he's always caught up in some kind of intrigue. It's like a real-life soap opera unfolding across the continent.
Everyone's on the edge of their seats, wondering what he'll do next.
Exactly. He becomes almost legendary, a figure admired and scandalous all at the same time.
Quite a combination.
It is. And his memoirs, they don't shy away from his flaws, but he doesn't dwell on them either. There's this bravado, a sense of I lived life on my own terms that really comes through in his writing.
It's interesting how, even as he embraces this image of the rogue, there's also this deep appreciation for knowledge, for intellectual pursuits.
That's what makes Casanova so complex, He wasn't just a hedonist chasing pleasure. He had wide-ranging interests: literature, philosophy, science, even mathematics. He corresponded with some of the greatest minds of his age. Voltaire, for example.
And wasn't he also a Freemason?
Yes. Initiated in Lyon, that connection seems to have opened doors for him throughout his travel.
Oh, I see.
Back then, Freemasonry was this network of influential men. Many of them shared Casanova's intellectual curiosity, his appreciation for esoteric knowledge.
So it wasn't just about secret handshakes and rituals.
Not at all. It provided him with access to a community of like-minded individuals, a support system as he continued his, shall we say, unconventional lifestyle. Which of course brings us to the legendary love affairs. While his memoirs are filled with these conquests, it's clear he viewed love as more than just a physical act.
So what was it about these relationships that captivated him? What was he really searching for?
He described them, in theatrical terms, with distinct acts, a buildup of tension, a climax, a carefully orchestrated ending.
Even in love, he was a performer, always crafting a narrative, playing a role. But was there any genuine affection there, or was it all just part of the performance?
I think it was more nuanced than that. While he was undoubtedly a master of social games, of seduction, there's also this genuine affection in his descriptions of many of the women he encountered. He often speaks of their intelligence, their wit, their unique qualities.
So it wasn't just about, fleeting physical encounters.
No, he genuinely appreciated women who could engage him intellectually, challenge him, keep up with his quick mind, his playful nature.
And it seems he was also comfortable walking away when the spark faded, or when he sensed a relationship had run its course. Like, he understood that passion, romantic connection, they're often ephemeral.
Absolutely. He wasn't weighed down by regret, by sentimentality, by the need to cling to the past. It's as if he was always looking ahead to the next adventure, the next encounter, the next chapter in his personal drama.
Always moving forward, never looking back. It's an interesting perspective on life, especially coming from someone who had such a tumultuous past.
And it's that constant forward momentum that makes his story so compelling. He was always striving for something more, always seeking new experiences, new knowledge.
He truly lived life on his own terms, embracing both the pleasures and the pitfalls that came with it. It makes you wonder what he truly valued in the end. What do you think his legacy is, beyond the image of the legendary lover?
Yeah, it's fascinating how Casanova's reputation has evolved, I guess. In his own time, he was notorious, but also respected. I mean, we fixate on the love affairs, but he really did move in powerful circles.
It's true. He corresponded with leading thinkers, undertook diplomatic missions, even worked as a spy.
It's almost like we forget he was a product of the Enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
Embracing reason, but also indulging in excess.
He really embodies those contradictions. But about those love affairs, I think the question of genuine care is a valid one.
Yeah, were these women just conquests to him? Or was there something deeper?
Well, his writing often highlights their intelligence, wit. He expresses genuine respect, admiration even.
So it wasn't just about, superficial charm. There could have been real depth to some of those relationships. I think so. He was a master of social games, for sure, but he also seems to have genuinely enjoyed female company. The conversation, intellectual exchange, not just the physical side.
But we can't ignore some of his actions. Pursuing women already in relationships or those in vulnerable positions, how do we reconcile that with this idea of genuine connection?
That's where applying modern values to the past gets tricky. Societal norms were different back then. Infidelity wasn't viewed the same way.
So even if some of his behavior was scandalous by 18th century standards, we have to understand the context.
Exactly. We're left with this complicated picture. A man of contradictions, admirable, but also morally ambiguous at times.
And that's what makes him so fascinating, right? He forces us to examine our own values.
Absolutely. He challenges our assumptions about love, sex, morality.
Because it's so easy to judge from our 21st century perspective.
It is, but we have to remember the world he lived in, a time of immense change, intellectually, socially.
He was at the heart of it all. Even that escape from prison speaks to his audacity.
Like, he approached every challenge as a chance to showcase his wit, cunning.
Almost as if life itself was this grand adventure to him, a performance, and he was directing it.
And his memoirs, that was his final act, solidifying his legacy on his own terms.
And he did it with style, I'll give him that.
Oh, absolutely. Giacomo Casanova, the lover, adventurer, scholar, rogue. He lived life to the fullest.
And left behind a legacy that still fascinates us centuries later. Well, there you have it, folks. Our deep dive into the world of Giacomo Casanova. We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully we've given you a taste of the man behind the myth. The real journey, though, begins when you explore the sources yourselves. Delve into those different perspectives, come to your own conclusions. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we are diving deep into a topic, well, let's face it, we all think about but don't always talk about.
Right.
Death. We're going to use excerpts from, of all things, Wikipedia's death entry.
Yeah.
We're going to uncover a whole lot more than you probably thought there was to know about this inevitable part of life, right?
Yeah.
So some thought-provoking questions. I mean, how do we even define death these days?
Yeah.
What happens to the body,
Right.
And how has this whole concept of death shaped human history and culture? I mean, it's a big one.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating how death, even though we all experience it,
Right.
it's so universal. It's so hard to actually define, like, what is it really?
You're right.
It used to be simple. No heartbeat, no breathing, that's it, you're done.
Right.
But then modern medicine came along and things like CPR and defibrillation, that really kind of changed things.
Yeah, like we almost challenge death.
Yeah.
Right. With technology, this is where this whole concept of brain death comes in.
Right.
Right. So we've shifted from the heart and lungs, like you said, to brain activity.
Right.
Right. So.
But even brain death, there's different interpretations. Some people think that all brain function has to stop,
Oh, wow.
while others think that as long as your brainstem is working,
Really?
then you're still biologically alive, even if you don't have personality or higher thought.
Right. So like a vegetative state.
Yeah, something like that. And that difference in criteria has huge implications, especially when you think about organ donation and stuff like that.
Right. Totally. It really makes you think about what does it even mean to be alive?
Yeah.
How do we even make those like really tough decisions when someone's on the verge of death? I mean, those are big questions, but
Yeah.
I guess before we get into all the ethical stuff,
Right.
What actually happens, like step by step
To the body. Yeah.
to the body
Yeah.
after death. I mean, we know no pulse, no breathing,
Right. Right.
but what else is going on?
Yeah, well, it's a whole process. First you have pallor mortis. That's when the skin gets pale because the blood stops circulating.
Interesting.
Then you have algor mortis, which is the cooling of the body to match the temperature around it.
Mm.
Then rigor mortis sets in, and the muscles stiffen because of chemical changes.
Oh, wow.
And then finally you have livor mortis, which is where gravity pulls the blood to the lower parts of the body, and that creates discoloration.
Wow. Okay, those are some pretty morbid terms.
They are.
But it's really like almost like a roadmap of what happens
Yeah.
to our physical self, right?
Right.
But, I was reading, there's this almost poetic side to it, too.
Yeah.
The body gradually returning to the earth
Right.
through decomposition,
Right.
eventually skeletonization. It's like a natural cycle.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, historically, people were terrified of being buried alive.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, back before we had these clear definitions of death, like we were just talking about, like people would go to extreme lengths
I bet.
to make sure that they were really dead.
Wow.
Like there were even safety coffins with like ways to signal
Really?
if you were buried alive.
I can't even imagine that fear.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about those old practices. They used to put vinegar and pepper in a dead person's mouth, or like poke them with hot pokers,
Yeah.
try and get a response. I
It
mean,
makes you wonder if some of them woke up.
ouch.
Yeah, talk about a rude awakening. But I guess it says something about how we've always, been afraid of death and tried to understand and control it.
Right.
But maybe let's shift gears a little bit. Talk
Okay.
about what actually causes death.
Okay.
And you know what? This is really interesting, but location plays a surprisingly big role.
Really? You mean like how people die in developing versus developed countries?
Yeah, exactly. It's actually a pretty big contrast. In developing nations, it's more about infectious diseases like tuberculosis, malaria. Those are still major killers.
Right.
But in developed countries, it's more about, aging. So like heart disease, cancer, all those age-related conditions.
Okay.
And it really comes down to how biological aging affects our bodies over time, and
Right.
makes us vulnerable
Right.
to all these diseases.
So it's like we tend to think of aging as inevitable.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how little research funding actually goes into anti-aging therapies.
That's true.
Almost like we just accepted it as fate,
It's interesting.
What if we could significantly extend the human lifespan? Would we even want that?
That's a big question. I mean, yeah, it brings up a lot of ethical and societal questions, like would a longer life be inherently better?
Right.
Would it create new inequalities? Maybe those are discussions for another time. But for now, let's keep in mind that death isn't always this gradual decline. Sometimes it's really sudden, completely unexpected.
Right. You think about natural disasters, earthquakes, floods. I mean, they can claim lives in an instant. And then you think about events like, that Bangkok Dam failure in China. That was a single event with a just tragically high death toll.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder of how an unpredictable death can be.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, even in the animal kingdom, death is a constant presence.
Oh, yeah.
Predation is a huge factor, especially for young animals. Like you think about fox cubs, bear cubs,
Right.
It's a pretty harsh reality, but, it shows that vulnerability to death. It's just woven into the fabric of life itself.
Right.
Really is.
And I think we need to kind of address this too. Death before birth.
Oh, yeah.
This is a sensitive topic. We're talking about stillbirths, miscarriages, abortions.
Right.
These are difficult subjects to talk about, but they're part of the bigger conversation
They are.
about death.
Absolutely. And they're actually more common than a lot of people realize.
Yeah, I think people don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
And it carries a profound weight
Yeah.
emotionally for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that death touches every stage of life,
Yeah.
even before it traditionally begins.
And while we don't want to dwell on the sadness of it all,
Of course.
it's important to acknowledge, I think, these are real experiences that many people face.
Mm-hmm.
But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about death from old age, what's called senescence.
Okay.
It's fascinating how our bodies kind of gradually decline,
Yeah.
right, over time, leading to our eventual, demise.
And, it's really interesting to contrast that with those organisms that don't age in the same way. Like we talked about the Turritopsis dohrnii jellyfish earlier.
Right.
They exhibit something called negligible senescence, meaning they don't really age the way we do.
Wow.
And some organisms, that even achieve a kind of biological immortality.
It's wild.
It makes you think, is aging and death really inevitable for all living things?
Okay, so, I mean, if some organisms can, like, cheat death,
Yeah.
right? What about us humans?
Yeah.
Any possibilities for life extension on the horizon?
Well, there are a few different approaches being explored. You've got calorie restriction, anti-aging therapies, and then there are more sort of radical ideas like tissue replacement, cryonics, where they preserve bodies at these really low temperatures.
Cryonics, wait, that sounds like science fiction. Is that even, like, scientifically plausible?
Well, it's based on the idea that what we define as death right now might not actually be the end.
Okay.
From like an information theoretic perspective. Like if we could preserve the information that makes up our personalities
Right.
and our memories,
Right.
could we theoretically be revived in the future?
Wow.
It's a fascinating idea, but, also controversial.
Totally. Definitely some food for thought.
Hmm.
But let's circle back to the fact that death, while being this universal experience, is approached so differently,
Yeah.
across history, across cultures.
All over the place.
And even the way we die has, shifted dramatically
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
over time.
Yeah. It used to be that people mostly died at home,
Oh, yeah.
surrounded by loved ones.
Yeah.
But now death often takes place in hospitals or, other medical institutions.
True.
It's almost become this invisible event, kind of hidden away from everyday life.
So it's invisible in the sense that it's, tucked away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a big contrast to cultures where death is more integrated into daily life.
Right. Yeah.
Families care for their dying loved ones at home. The rituals surrounding death are more communal. They're out in the open.
It makes you wonder if this whole invisible death thing, if it makes it harder to process,
Yeah.
grief and loss.
I think it's a valid concern. When death is removed from our immediate experience, it can be harder to really confront it, to understand it.
Right.
And that can lead to a sense of isolation and a lack of support for those who are grieving.
It seems like there's this balance
Yeah.
between the advancements in modern medicine,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
and then the need to kind of acknowledge and embrace death,
Absolutely.
right, as part of life.
We have to find ways to integrate death back into our lives.
Right.
Not in a morbid way,
Right.
but in a way that lets us process it,
Right.
learn from it, support each other through it.
It's almost like we need to reclaim death
Yeah.
from the institutions
Yeah.
and bring it back into the realm of human experience.
Exactly.
Right.
Well said.
Well, speaking of human experience, let's talk about the psychology of death.
Yeah.
We touched on the fear of death, but it's got to be more complex,
Yeah.
right, than that.
Oh, it is. It's a lot more than just fearing the unknown. It's about how our awareness of our own mortality
Right.
shapes our thoughts, our behaviors, even our values.
Right. So psychologists have studied this concept of mortality salience.
Yeah, it's a good term.
Right. Which is basically how aware are we of our own mortality?
How much do you think about it?
Right. And it turns out that awareness, it can actually have a pretty significant impact on how we live our lives.
It really can.
Really. So the fact that we know we're going to die actually influences our choices and actions in the present.
It does, yeah. Studies have shown that if you kind of remind people of their mortality,
Wow.
it can lead to all sorts of responses,
Really?
Increased altruism, wanting to help others, or people become more rigid in their beliefs.
Interesting.
It's almost like we're trying to find meaning.
So our brains are grappling with
Big
this,
time, yeah.
with this existential dilemma.
Yeah.
On one hand, we have this grip to survive.
Right.
Right. Avoid death at all costs. But then on the other hand,
Yeah.
knowing that we're finite
Right.
can actually motivate us
Yeah.
to live more fully,
It can.
and make the most of our time.
Yeah, it's a really powerful paradox, that awareness of death. It can both paralyze you with fear, but it can also propel you to live more intentionally.
And speaking of living intentionally, let's talk about how different cultures
Yeah.
approach death. Not just psychologically,
Right.
but practically.
Yeah, practically, what do they do?
We were talking about all these rituals,
Right, yeah.
the traditions surrounding death.
The variety is incredible, isn't it? The
Very
ways that we
funny.
care for the dead, how we dispose of bodies, how we commemorate people who've died. It's just,
So different. I mean, we've got everything from, elaborate funerals and cremation ceremonies
yeah.
to sky burials in Tibet, mummification in ancient Egypt.
Right.
It's amazing.
And all these practices, they reflect a culture's beliefs about the afterlife,
yeah.
the nature of the soul and the relationship between the living and the dead.
Right. It's like a framework for understanding death
Yeah,
and then navigating the grieving process.
absolutely. It's not just about the rituals themselves. It's about the meaning behind them,
Yeah.
Some cultures, they use bright colors and joyful music
Yeah.
to celebrate the life of the deceased.
Right.
While others, mourn through wearing dark clothes, through lamentations, through crying,
Totally.
It's fascinating.
And it gives people a way to cope,
Right.
right, with loss, to find solace,
Mhm.
and really to connect with their community during times of grief.
Exactly. It's so important. And even within a single culture, there can be a lot of variation
Yeah.
in how death is approached.
Right. You think about the United States, for example. I mean, we've got a whole range of religious and secular beliefs.
Right, right.
about
Oh,
death,
yeah, absolutely.
And this shows up in all the different kinds of funeral practices
Yeah.
and memorial services and,
It's a good reminder that even in a society that seems kind of on the surface homogenous,
Yeah.
individual beliefs and personal preferences really play a role
Right.
in how we deal with death and dying.
And, sometimes those individual beliefs clash with, like, societal norms
Yeah.
or legal frameworks. We talked about capital punishment earlier
Yeah.
and all the ethical debates around it.
Huge debates.
It's a perfect example of how divided we can be on issues related to death.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, then there are all these ongoing conversations
Right.
about end-of-life care,
Right.
euthanasia, the right to die with dignity.
Right.
These are really complex issues, no easy answers,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it highlights the importance of, like, having those open dialogues
Yeah,
and respecting different perspectives.
absolutely.
Because death really does force us
Yeah.
to confront our values, our beliefs.
Our responsibilities to ourselves and to each other.
It's a lot.
It is.
The big topic. Speaking of, remembering,
Oh, yeah.
let's talk about the stories.
Stories we tell.
Yeah, we tell about death.
About death.
I mean, from ancient myths
Yeah.
to modern literature and film, death has always been, like, this source of inspiration.
It has been a muse. Yeah.
Right. For artists
For sure.
and storytellers.
Absolutely. And, I think a lot of that is because these stories, they give us a way to explore our fears, our hopes about death, to try and make sense of the unknown and to find meaning in the face of loss.
And they show that death, while being a shared experience, is also really personal.
Absolutely. Every individual is going to face death in their own way, shaped by their beliefs, their experiences, their relationships.
Right.
And, that's a really key takeaway from our whole deep dive today.
I agree.
Death isn't this monolithic concept.
Yeah.
It's woven into the fabric of our lives, our cultures, and how we understand the universe
Yeah.
in just countless ways.
It has been fascinating to uncover how deeply death is connected to everything from the cycle of life,
Right.
In nature,
Yeah.
to the evolution of human societies
Right.
and the stories that we tell each other,
Absolutely.
to make sense of it all.
And I think as we wrap up this first part,
Right.
we should acknowledge kind of the elephant in the room,
The fear.
the fear that surrounds death. It's natural.
Yeah.
It's a human emotion, and it's deeply rooted in our instinct to survive.
But as we've seen, that fear, it doesn't have to be paralyzing.
Right.
The fact that we're aware of our own mortality can actually be a pretty powerful motivator.
Exactly. It can help us to live more fully, appreciate the present moment,
Yeah.
And make choices that really align with our values.
Right.
It can inspire us to have better relationships, pursue our passions, and leave a positive mark on the world.
It's almost like death.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
In an odd way.
Can help us live more meaningful lives.
It's true.
Right? It reminds us that our time is precious
Yeah.
and that we have the power to make the most of it.
That's a great way to put it.
So as we kind of pause here,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with a little bit of a challenge.
A challenge. Okay.
Right. To think about your own relationship
Yeah.
with death.
With math, how do you feel about it?
Right. How does knowing that you're going to die someday, how does that affect your thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
your actions, your goals? What steps can you take to live more authentically, to connect more deeply with others, to make a difference in the world?
These are not easy questions,
No,
but they're worth asking.
they are. As we've learned, death is complex. It's multifaceted.
It is.
And our understanding is always evolving.
Yeah.
But one thing is for sure, it's an integral part of being human.
It is. Absolutely.
And by exploring it, by confronting our fears, by embracing the present moment, we can actually live, I think, richer, more meaningful lives.
I think so too.
Welcome back to our deep dive into death. We've been exploring all these different facets, the biological processes, the cultural variations, and the emotional weight. It's a heavy topic.
Yeah, it is.
But before the break, we were talking about how death is really intertwined with the natural world. It's not just an ending, it's also a beginning.
It's true.
It's a catalyst for new life.
Yeah. It's interesting how death, even though we often perceive it as an ending,
Right,
it's really a crucial element of renewal
right.
and balance in nature. Think about the cycle of nutrients in ecosystems.
Oh, yeah.
Decomposition breaks down organic matter, and that releases all these essential elements back into the soil, which then nourishes new plant life. So death, in a sense, is actually fueling the continuation of life.
It's like this constant give and take.
Yeah, a cycle.
A cycle. And speaking of cycles, those organisms that seem to defy aging, like that jellyfish we were talking about.
Yeah, the immortal jellyfish.
What can we learn from them about maybe extending the human lifespan?
Well, I mean, the idea of achieving immortality, like the Turritopsis dohrnii, it's definitely captivating.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that these organisms, they've evolved these unique biological mechanisms that allow them to reset their life cycles. And,
Right.
applying those to humans is a whole other ball game.
So like these jellyfish, they might hold clues, but replicating that quote-unquote immortality in humans,
Yeah.
it's a ways off.
It's a long way off. And even if we could significantly extend human lifespans, it begs the question, would we want to?
Right.
What would be the social and ethical implications of, people living for centuries?
Oh, man. That's a big question.
It is a big question.
Just imagine the societal changes, the impact on resources. I mean, the potential for new inequalities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it challenges our whole notion of what it means to be human.
Right.
Would our values change? Would our priorities change if we knew we had centuries to live? Would we become complacent? Or would we be more driven to, make our mark on the world?
Right. It's like opening this Pandora's box of possibilities and dilemmas.
Yeah, definitely.
But for now, I think we need to bring it back down to earth.
Okay.
Talk about how different cultures handle death,
Right.
practically.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
talk about that shift,
Yeah.
from dying at home
Right.
to dying in hospitals.
Yeah.
It's almost like death has become institutionalized.
Yeah. In many developed countries, death is often seen as a medical event, something to be managed in hospitals, in healthcare institutions.
Right.
And this can create a distance between the dying process
Oh, yeah.
and the everyday lives of people. It leads to what some have called invisible death.
Invisible in the sense that it's tucked away,
Yeah.
hidden from view.
Exactly, yeah. It's a big contrast to those cultures where death is more integrated into daily life,
Right.
where families take care of their dying loved ones at home. The rituals surrounding death are more communal, they're more visible.
It makes you wonder if this invisible death thing, if it makes it more difficult for people to process grief and loss.
Yeah, that's a valid concern for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, when death is removed from our immediate experience, it can be harder to really confront it,
Right.
to understand it.
Yeah.
And that can lead to, a sense of isolation, a lack of support for people who are grieving.
It seems like there's this delicate balance
Yeah.
between the advancements of modern medicine and the need to kind of acknowledge and embrace death.
Absolutely. We need to find ways to integrate death back into our lives, not in a morbid way, but in a way that allows us to process it,
Right.
to learn from it, to support each other through it.
It's like we need to reclaim death from the institutions and bring it back into the realm of human experience.
Yeah, well said.
Speaking of human experience, let's dig a little deeper into the psychology of death.
Okay. Yeah.
We touched on the fear of death, but it's so much more complex than that.
Oh, it is. It's not
Okay.
just about fearing the unknown.
Right.
It's about how the awareness of our own mortality actually shapes us.
Yeah.
It affects our thoughts, our behaviors, even our values.
Right. So psychologists have studied this concept. I think we mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
Mortality salience.
Mortality salience, yeah. Basically how aware we are of our own,
Our own death.
our own mortality, yeah.
And it turns out that awareness can have a really significant impact
Huge, yeah.
on how we actually live our lives.
Absolutely.
So the fact that we know we are going to die someday
Yeah.
actually influences the choices we make and our actions in the present.
Yeah, it does. Studies have shown that if you remind people of their mortality, even subtly, it can trigger all sorts of responses,
Right.
Sometimes it leads to increased altruism, wanting to help others.
Wow.
Sometimes it leads to more rigid adherence to their beliefs.
Interesting.
It's like we're trying to find meaning,
Mhm.
trying to make sense of things in light of this fact that we're not going to be here forever.
It's fascinating how our brains are trying to grapple
Yeah.
with this huge dilemma. On the one hand, we have this drive to survive,
Right, of course.
to avoid death at all costs. But on the other hand, knowing that we're finite beings
Yeah,
can motivate us
it's true.
to live more fully, to make the most of our time.
Yeah, it's a really powerful paradox. That awareness of death It can paralyze you with fear, but it can also propel you to live more intentionally.
Speaking of living intentionally, let's talk about how different cultures approach death, not just psychologically, but, practically.
Okay.
We were talking earlier about all the different
The
rituals
traditions,
and
yeah.
traditions surrounding death.
It's amazing the variety, isn't it?
It's incredible. I mean, the ways that we care for the dead,
Yeah.
how we dispose of bodies, how we remember those who have passed.
It's just incredible, yeah. We have everything from elaborate funerals to cremation ceremonies
Right.
to sky burials in Tibet, mummification in ancient Egypt.
It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And all these practices, they really reflect the culture's beliefs about the afterlife.
Right.
The nature of the soul and the relationship between the living and the dead. They give us this framework for kind of understanding death and navigating that grieving process.
And it's not just about the rituals themselves, it's about the meaning and the symbolism behind them.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
For example, some cultures use bright colors and joyful music to celebrate the life of the person who's died.
Right.
While others use more somber attire, lamentations, to express mourning.
It's about, providing a way for people to cope with loss,
Right.
to find solace, to connect with their community in times of grief.
And even within a single culture, there can be variations
Oh, absolutely.
in how death is approached. Like, take the United States, for example.
Right, yeah.
I mean, we have this whole range of religious and secular beliefs
Right.
about death.
Right, yeah.
And that's reflected in all the different types of funeral practices and memorial services.
It's a reminder that even in a society that might seem homogenous on the surface, individual beliefs and personal preferences really play a big role in how we deal with death and dying.
And sometimes those individual beliefs clash.
Yeah.
Right, with societal norms or legal frameworks. We were talking earlier about capital punishment.
Yeah, huge debate.
All the ethical debates surrounding it.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a prime example of how divided we can be on issues related to death.
It really is. And then there are all the ongoing discussions about end-of-life care.
Right.
Euthanasia, the right to die with dignity.
Right.
These are complex issues with no easy answers.
Yeah.
It really highlights how important it is to have open dialogue and to respect different perspectives.
It's like death forces us to confront our values.
Yeah.
Our beliefs.
Our responsibilities to ourselves and to each other. It's a
Yeah.
big one.
It's a lot to process, but that's what's so great about this deep dive,
Yeah.
It's sparking all these new thoughts and questions about death and its role in our lives.
And those questions are definitely worth exploring further. But for now, I think let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far and get ready to wrap up this journey into the realm of death with some final thoughts and a challenge for our listeners to carry forward.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring death.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
It has, hasn't it? All the different aspects, the biological stuff, the cultural interpretations, and, how death really affects us psychologically. I mean, it's heavy.
It is.
But before the break, we were talking about how stories about death help us kind of process this.
Yeah, the narratives, they offer a way to kind of process our fears and anxieties, about the unknown. And they allow us to explore all these different perspectives, what might be beyond this life. So it can be kind of comforting, I guess. Or, in some cases, a real stark reminder that we're not going to live forever.
And it highlights how death, while a shared experience, is also deeply personal, right?
Yeah.
Each individual is going to face it.
In their own way.
In their own way. Shaped by their beliefs and their experiences and their relationships.
Absolutely.
And, that's a key takeaway from our whole deep dive. Death is not just this one thing.
It's so multifaceted.
It's woven into, every part of our lives, our cultures, how we understand the universe.
Yeah, in countless ways.
It's been fascinating to uncover how deeply it's connected to everything, from the cycle of life in nature to the evolution of societies and the stories we tell to make sense of it all.
And as we wrap up, I think it's important to acknowledge, the fear.
The fear.
Yeah, fear.
The elephant in the room.
Yeah. The elephant in the room, exactly. The fear that surrounds death. I mean, it's natural. It's a human emotion. It's rooted in our instinct to survive.
But as we've seen, that fear doesn't have to completely paralyze us.
Oh, and actually the awareness of our own mortality can be a really powerful motivator.
Right.
It can inspire us to live more fully, to really appreciate the present moment, and to make choices that really align with our values.
Yeah.
It can inspire us to have deeper relationships, to go after our passions, and to try to leave a positive impact on the world.
It's like death
Yeah,
in a weird way.
in an odd way.
It can be a catalyst for living a more meaningful life.
It can.
Right. It reminds us that our time here is precious and that we have the power to make the most of it.
That's a great way to put it.
So as we conclude our deep dive,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with a challenge
A challenge.
to really reflect on your own relationship with death. Think about how knowing you're going to die someday, how does that affect your thoughts, your actions? What are your goals? What steps can you take to live more authentically, to connect more deeply with the people around you, to make a difference in the world?
These are big questions.
They are big questions.
They're worth thinking about.
As we've learned, death is complex, it's multifaceted, and our understanding of it, it's always changing.
It is.
But one thing's for sure, it's part of the human experience. And by exploring it, by facing our fears, by living in the present moment, we can live, I think, richer, more fulfilling lives.
I think so too.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you learned something. We hope it's got you thinking. We hope it's inspired you. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep living life to the fullest.
All right, so get ready because today we are going deep into the world of butterflies.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, I asked you to take a look at the Wikipedia article on butterflies.
Yes.
And I have to admit, even just reading through that, my mind is blown.
Really?
Yeah, butterflies taste with their feet.
It's amazing.
They can navigate across continents.
It is.
And their wings are inspiring like all this new technology.
It's true.
We need to unpack all of this.
Let's do it.
Okay, so one thing that really stood out to me right away was that butterflies actually evolved from moths.
Yeah.
So, I always just kind of assumed that they were separate branches on the tree of life.
That's a common misconception.
Is it?
Yeah, so while both belong to the order Lepidoptera, which
Okay.
means scale-winged,
Okay.
butterflies actually evolved from moths.
Really?
So it's not that they're completely separate, but
Gotcha.
here's the twist. Butterflies form a single distinct lineage
Okay.
called a clade, meaning they all share a common ancestor.
Okay.
Moths, on the other hand, don't form a neat clade.
Oh.
They're a bit more scattered across that evolutionary tree.
So butterflies are like the exclusive club
Exactly.
within the larger moth family.
Exactly. And that exclusivity is what makes butterflies so fascinating. They evolved these specific traits that set them apart
Okay.
and led to their incredible diversity.
And then the article also mentioned the oldest butterfly fossil is about 55 million years old,
Wow.
which puts them way back in the Paleocene era.
Yeah, that's a long time.
The dinosaurs are long gone, but butterflies are just getting started,
They're survivors.
The thing looked very different back then.
So the oldest known butterfly fossil is Protocooliades christenseni.
Try saying that 5 times fast.
Yeah, don't even try it.
I won't.
But it was a skipper.
Oh, wow.
Those skippers are those small, fast-flying butterflies you often see,
Okay.
darting around meadows and things.
I've seen those.
So imagine them flitting around in a world after the dinosaurs. And what's interesting is that skippers are considered relatively primitive butterflies.
Okay.
So even 55 million years ago, they already had a lot of the core characteristics we associate with butterflies today.
Gotcha. So before we get lost in prehistoric butterflies,
Yeah.
let's just go back to the basics.
Okay.
What exactly makes a butterfly a butterfly?
That's a good question.
I think we all know they're beautiful,
Right.
but what sets them apart from moths?
So apart from their stunning looks,
Right.
a few key features define a butterfly.
Okay.
You've got those 4 wings
Yes.
covered in scales,
Right.
which actually give the entire order Lepidoptera its name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, lepis meaning scale,
Mm.
and temano meaning wing in ancient Greek.
So we're getting a language lesson
Look, good.
within our butterfly deep dive.
There you go.
I'm loving this already.
Always happy to add a layer of etymology.
I appreciate it.
But back to those scales.
Okay.
They're actually responsible for creating those vibrant colors we associate with butterflies.
Oh.
So some colors, like blacks and browns, those come from melanin pigments, just like in our skin.
Right.
Yellows come from uric acid derivatives and flavones.
It's interesting.
But here's where it gets really cool. A lot of the blues and greens and reds, those shimmering iridescent colors, are created by something called structural coloration.
Wait, structural coloration,
Yeah.
so it's not just pigments.
It's not just pigments.
How does that even work?
It's like having microscopic prisms built into their wings.
Oh, wow.
Think of it like a soap bubble.
Okay.
You know, those colors aren't from pigments.
Right.
It's just from the way the light interacts with that thin film of soap.
Yeah.
So the scales on a butterfly's wing are structured in a way that manipulates light.
Wow.
Specific wavelengths of light are reflected and amplified through a process called interference.
Okay.
Creating those intense and often iridescent colors, it's nature's way of creating a light show.
That's mind-blowing.
It
It's
is
nature, you crafty artist. But okay, so how do we tell butterflies apart from moths just by looking?
Good question.
Besides, butterflies being generally more colorful.
Well, butterflies have those distinctive clubbed antennae,
Okay.
which most moths lack.
Gotcha.
Then there's their long proboscis.
Right, that straw-like tongue.
Exactly, for sipping nectar.
Yeah.
And then think about how they hold their wings.
Okay.
Butterflies typically hold them vertically when at rest.
Okay.
Moths either lay them flat or fold them over their bodies.
Gotcha.
And most butterflies are active during the day.
Right. Diurnal.
Exactly, while moths are generally nocturnal.
Okay, so if you see like a colorful scale-winged insect fluttering around in the sunshine with clubbed antenna,
You got it.
you're probably looking at a butterfly.
Most likely.
So many little details to look out for.
There are.
But speaking of secrets,
Yeah.
we've got to talk about that incredible 4-stage life cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Egg, caterpillar, pupa, and adult butterfly. It's like a biological magic trick.
It's one of the most amazing transformations in nature.
It is.
Complete metamorphosis, as it's called, is a biological superpower
Really?
that allows insects to exploit different resources and habitats throughout their lives.
Okay, so walk me through it. Like, what happens in each stage?
Okay, so it all starts with a tiny egg,
Yeah.
carefully laid by the female butterfly, often on a specific type of plant called the host plant.
Oh, okay.
Those eggs are tiny,
Yeah.
but incredibly durable, with a hard outer shell
Right.
and a waxy coating to protect them.
Gotcha. And then out pops a hungry caterpillar, right?
Exactly.
Eating machines.
So the larva, or caterpillar, hatches from the egg,
Yeah.
and its main job is to eat.
Right.
They mostly munch on leaves, fueling their rapid growth.
Yeah, they're growing like crazy.
Right. As they grow, they shed their skin multiple times.
Oh, wow.
And each stage between molts is called an instar.
An instar.
Yeah, it's like they're constantly outgrowing their clothes.
And then comes the big transformation, right?
The chrysalis.
Yes.
Yeah, so once the caterpillar is fully grown,
Yeah.
it enters the pupa stage. Encasing itself in a chrysalis,
Right.
this is where the real magic happens.
Yeah, what's going on in there?
Inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar undergoes a complete reorganization of its tissues.
Wow.
It's like nature's version of a 3D printer, breaking down the caterpillar's body and rebuilding it into a butterfly.
Really?
Hmm.
And then grand finale, we have the adult butterfly emerge from the chrysalis,
Yes.
pumps up its wings, takes to the sky. It's like witnessing a rebirth.
It truly is. But it's important to remember this stunning transformation isn't just about beauty. It's about survival and reproduction.
So the adult stage is all about finding a mate, laying eggs, and starting the cycle over.
Precisely. The adult butterfly has a limited lifespan.
Okay.
And during that time, its primary focus is ensuring the continuation of its species.
Okay, so we've covered the basics,
We have
but now I want to get to the really cool stuff. Like, what about those amazing survival tactics? Like the camouflage, the mimicry. Tell me more.
Let's do it. The art of deception in the butterfly world.
Right.
It's a constant game of hide and seek.
It is.
And butterflies have evolved some truly remarkable ways
Yeah.
to avoid becoming a predator's next meal.
It's a high-stakes game out there.
It is.
So let's start with camouflage.
Okay.
I mean, some of these butterflies practically disappear into
Yeah.
their surroundings. It's
Totally.
like they've mastered the art of invisibility.
You're thinking of butterflies like the oak leaf
Okay.
or the autumn leaf.
Okay.
Their wings mimic leaves so perfectly
Yeah.
that predators often just overlook them completely.
It's incredible.
The oak leaf even has these little vein-like markings and irregular edges
Oh, wow.
that make it look like a dead, curled-up leaf.
It's amazing.
It's incredible.
And then it's not just the adults
Right.
that are masters of disguise.
No.
Even the caterpillars get in on the camouflage action.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they can look like sticks,
Mm,
branches, even bird droppings.
it's true.
Talk about blending in.
Yeah. And then you have mimicry,
Oh.
which takes deception to a whole new level.
Okay.
Some perfectly harmless butterflies
Yeah.
have evolved to look almost identical
Really?
to poisonous species.
So it's like they're wearing a warning sign
Exactly.
that says, don't eat me, I'll make you sick.
Right.
But they're perfectly safe.
Exactly. It's brilliant.
Do you have an example of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the common Mormon butterfly,
Okay.
found in India,
Okay.
has female morphs that mimic the red-bodied swallowtails,
Oh, wow.
like the common rose and the crimson rose.
Okay.
The Wikipedia article actually has images, so
Oh,
you can
okay.
see how close the resemblance is.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, but these swallowtails are toxic.
Okay.
So predators avoid them.
Makes sense.
And the common Mormon females, by mimicking their appearance,
Right.
gain protection
Oh, okay.
without having to produce any toxins themselves.
So it's like the ultimate Halloween costume party.
It is.
But the stakes are way higher than just getting the most candy.
Exactly.
This is life or death.
This is survival.
So that type of mimicry,
Yeah.
where a harmless species imitates a harmful one,
Right.
that's called Batesian mimicry.
That's right. Named after the naturalist Henry Walter Bates,
Okay.
who first described it.
Gotcha.
But it gets even more fascinating.
Oh.
There's also Müllerian mimicry.
Okay, Müllerian mimicry, what's the difference?
So in Müllerian mimicry, multiple toxic species
Uh-huh.
evolve to resemble each other.
Really?
Yeah, it's like they're all wearing the same warning uniform,
Wow.
reinforcing the message to predators.
Oh,
A
interesting.
great example of this is the Heliconius butterflies,
Okay.
also known as longwings, found in the Americas.
Okay.
They have these vibrant, almost identical patterns,
Yeah.
warning predators of their shared toxicity.
That's so cool.
Again, the Wikipedia article has some amazing images that really bring this to life.
I'll have to go back and check those out.
Yeah.
So it's like strength in numbers. Even predators learn to avoid that particular look because they know it means trouble.
It's fascinating to see.
Yeah.
It's an example of convergent evolution,
Okay.
where different species evolve similar traits
Right.
because it benefits them all.
So it's a win-win for the butterflies
Right.
and a lose-lose for the predators.
Exactly.
Nature is so clever.
It is.
Okay. But camouflage and mimicry aren't the only tricks up a butterfly's sleeve.
No,
You mentioned they also have some surprising dietary needs.
they do.
I always thought they just sipped nectar from flowers.
Right. Nectar is a great source of sugar
Yeah.
for energy,
Makes sense.
but it doesn't provide all the nutrients
Mm.
butterflies need, especially sodium. That's where things get a bit messy, literally.
Okay. You've got my attention.
All right.
What's this about messy eating habits?
Well, have you ever seen a group of butterflies gathered on a mud puddle,
I have.
seemingly sipping up the muddy water?
Yeah, it always seems so strange to me.
Yeah.
So it's not just a random butterfly social gathering.
No, it's not.
They actually need those muddy minerals.
These do. It's called mud puddling.
Mud puddling, okay.
And it's essential for their survival.
Wow.
Butterflies, particularly males,
Okay.
gather on mud puddles to extract those dissolved minerals,
Oh, wow.
especially sodium.
Really?
And it's thought that they need this extra sodium for reproduction.
So those mud puddles are like butterfly health spas,
You could say that.
packed with essential minerals,
Mhm.
electrolytes.
Yep.
Who knew?
And there's even speculation
Okay.
that the sodium might be a gift
Oh.
from the males to the females during mating.
Wow.
A sort of nuptial gift.
That's so romantic, a sodium-rich love token.
There you go.
Talk about winning a butterfly's heart.
Right.
Okay, but speaking of romance, let's talk about those epic migrations.
Oh, yeah.
Some butterflies travel thousands of miles.
I know. It's mind-boggling.
How do they even do it?
So the monarch butterfly is the poster child for butterfly migrations, traveling thousands of miles between Canada and Mexico each year.
Yeah.
But here's the really amazing part. It takes multiple generations
Wait, what?
to complete the journey.
Multiple generations.
Yeah.
You're telling me no single butterfly actually flies the entire route?
Yeah, that's right. The monarchs that start the migration in the fall
Yeah.
aren't the same ones that reach the overwintering grounds in Mexico.
Wow.
They lay eggs along the way.
Oh.
And it's their offspring and their offspring's offspring
Wow.
that eventually complete the migration.
That's That's incredible.
Then the cycle reverses in the spring,
Yeah.
with new generations flying back north.
Which is like a relay race
It is.
across continents, with each generation passing the baton to the next.
Exactly.
It makes those individual journeys seem even more remarkable.
It does. And if you think the monarch migration is impressive,
Yeah.
the painted lady butterfly takes the concept of an epic journey to a whole new level.
Hold on, the painted lady migrates even farther than the monarch.
It does.
I had no idea.
The painted lady undertakes an astonishing 9,000-mile
What?
round-trip migration
No way.
from tropical Africa to the Arctic Circle and back.
Oh my goodness.
Also over multiple generations.
That's almost double the distance
It is.
covered by the monarchs. That's
Yeah.
just, wow.
I know.
But how on earth do they navigate over such vast distances?
Right?
Do they have like tiny internal GPS systems or something?
Not quite a GPS,
Okay.
but they do have an incredible internal compass
Oh, wow.
that relies on the sun and polarized light.
Okay.
Even on cloudy days, they can sense the direction of the sun's rays
Really?
and use that information to stay on course.
Wow.
They also seem to use landmarks
Oh.
and even the Earth's magnetic field
Whoa.
to fine-tune their navigation.
Really?
This is an area of ongoing research.
Okay.
We're still unraveling all
Yeah.
the secrets of their navigational prowess.
That's absolutely mind-blowing.
It is.
So we've talked about how butterflies have mastered deception and navigation. Right.
But you also mentioned that they've inspired some pretty cool technology.
We have.
Tell me more about that. So from masters of disguise to like long-distance champions,
I know, right?
butterflies are officially blowing my mind.
It's incredible, isn't it?
But you were saying how they're inspiring new technologies. This I have to hear.
It's a field called biomimicry,
Okay.
essentially taking inspiration from nature
Right.
to solve human problems.
Yeah.
And butterflies, with their intricate wing structures and brilliant colors,
Right.
have been a goldmine of inspiration.
That makes sense. I mean, nature's had millions of years to like perfect these designs.
Exactly.
So how are scientists using butterflies as inspiration? Give me some specifics.
Well, one area is in the development of more efficient LED lighting.
Oh, okay.
So remember that structural coloration we talked about?
Yeah.
Those tiny scales on butterfly wings that create those dazzling colors?
Right?
They're incredibly good at manipulating light.
Yeah.
Scientists have studied those structures to design LEDs.
That produce brighter light while using less energy.
So our light bulbs might be getting a butterfly makeover.
You could say that.
That's so cool. What else?
That's just the beginning.
Really?
Butterfly wings are also inspiring research into new types of paints and display technologies.
Wow.
Imagine paints that create color, not through pigments, but through structural coloration.
Really?
It's like butterfly wings.
That'd be amazing.
They could be more environmentally friendly and create those amazing, shimmering, color-shifting effects.
Sign me up for some butterfly-inspired paint.
Right.
And what about display screens? Could we see those using the same principles?
Absolutely. Researchers are exploring ways to mimic the structure of butterfly wings to create vibrant, energy-efficient displays
Okay.
for phones, TVs, and other devices.
That's incredible.
The potential applications are truly vast.
Butterflies, masters of disguise, epic travelers, and now technological muses.
I know, it's
Who
amazing.
knew they had so much to offer?
Right. This deep dive has been incredible.
It really has. It makes you realize how much wonder there is in the natural world, just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely.
You know, it's funny, we started this deep dive talking about how butterflies have inspired technology.
Yeah.
But in a way, it feels like they're also teaching us about ourselves.
How so?
You know, their resilience, their adaptability, their sheer determination to like survive and thrive. It's inspiring.
It is. Their migrations are a testament to the power of perseverance and adaptation.
Yeah.
You know, their life cycles embody transformation and renewal.
Right.
And their intricate beauty reminds us of the artistry of the natural world.
So to wrap up this incredible journey into the world of butterflies, I have a question for you, dear listener.
Okay.
We've explored their science, their beauty, their epic journeys.
Yeah.
But what about their inner lives?
Hmm.
If butterflies could talk, what stories would they tell us about their world?
Wow.
About their challenges, their triumphs?
That's a great question.
What wisdom would they impart?
What a beautiful thought. Maybe they tell us how the changing seasons, the dwindling wildflower meadows,
Yeah.
the challenges of navigating a world increasingly impacted by humans.
Right.
Or perhaps they'd share secrets of the wind, the sun, the flowers.
It makes you want to pay closer attention
It does.
to truly see the butterflies around us.
Yeah.
not just as beautiful creatures, but as beings with their own stories,
Right.
their own wisdom to share.
Who knows? Maybe by listening closely, we can learn not only about butterflies, but about ourselves and our place in this incredible interconnected world.
Beautifully said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of butterflies.
It's been my pleasure.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking to nature for inspiration and wonder.
Yes.
Until next time.